As a result of the facility master plan that was conducted by Worthington Public Schools that ended in 2017, there was a call for significant renovation and new construction of middle school grades. A result of that is creating educational specifications for the Worthington schools, specifically focused on middle school construction and renovation. Over the next several months, we'll be conducting a process to develop educational specifications for the middle schools in Worthington City Schools. This process of developing educational specifications is an iterative process that builds upon how schools are built based on the functions, not just the form. To define what an educational specification is, we look at some of the experts out in the field that help us outline the purpose and what an educational specification is designed to do. But basically what it is a detailed narrative to develop a design process. It outlines what the community's expectation of learning environments and the physical environments are going to be based on what is going to happen within the school. And so you design a school based on the functions that occur within the school. In simplest terms, it's a written documentation of what educators' intent for the program delivery is that defines what the physical space will look like in time. To be very clear though, we're not designing buildings. We are simply planning, creating the vision, the narrative of the program, how the curriculum will fit in, and draft up what the space requirements will look like and eventually how they'll fit together. I think we all remember our middle grades education, and it is a difficult time for most to grow up. It represents a time of real development of the adolescent and a rapid development of the adolescent, of time of change for growth that will also help determine and shape not only high school but future decisions that a student will have to make in their academic career. So when reviewing what the trends are in middle grades education, that'll help us review kind of what the design process will be based on the functions that will occur. So looking at broader coursework of how we move to more digital literacy and how the media is brought into the classroom instead of leaving the classroom to get there, and more spaces designed around collaborative learning. How this will emerge as design influence will be that we're going to need spaces that have increased flexibility, that are designed to be changed in time, that no longer isolate students and faculty and staff into silos of different parts of the building, but really brings everything together, whether that's through space types or technology, or simply how the delivery model for teaching will be in the future. But any educational specification should start with the mission of Worthington City Schools. It is the keywords that we find within the vision statement of Worthington City Schools that really help us set the foundation for the educational specification. Things like providing diverse opportunities, obviously providing those safest environments that students can grow within their intellect or their emotion or grow socially, and certainly in the physical aspects as they go through change. It should promote that dialogue and by creating spaces that allow people to communicate more freely and to share information. And then also being responsible. Responsible meaning that we should look at our facilities as resources of our community and not necessarily have to rebuild just to rebuild, but hold on to those resources that are still very viable to our community. There are essential parts that help us define what a building will look like in time, and part of those are described in the educational specifications. We talk about things like sustainable design and how we're going to make the best use of the resources we have. We talk about site standards, which will include things like circulation of buses and pedestrians and bicycle traffic, but also defines playgrounds and athletic spaces. We talk significantly about health and safety of our students and what buildings and how buildings will have an impact on the health and safety of students and staff in the future. And then certainly technology plays a big role in how we'll design future facilities. We first start with sustainability, which basically outlines how buildings better use energy resources in the future. If the district decided that they would partner with the OFCC to co-fund facilities in the future. LEED is one area that they go to. LEED is a measurement of how buildings best accommodate a sustainable parameter for the future. They pay attention to, LEED standards pay attention to things like the location of building to make sure that we're more efficient with transportation, but also really take a look at how the energy usage and water usage will be used to, first of all, maintain the building better in the future, but also in the long term will save dollars to operate the building. All these innovations can be included into a building that might take a different look, but in the end, make the building more useful for education and will save dollars for the district in the future. Some of the benefits that we can see for sustainable buildings is when if we create them optimally, we can save a quarter, 25% of energy that we currently use today. The satisfaction of occupants into buildings that are built more sustainable and healthy is you see higher rates of satisfaction in those buildings. Long-term maintenance costs, lower emissions, and then certainly increased productivity because the buildings are healthier and we get higher attendance rates, and students have more energy when there's natural light and fresh air coming in buildings. Another sustainable method is to build spaces that can be used for multiple uses instead of just one use. Other considerations we should look at is just to basically reduce our overall carbon footprint. Using a more proactive recycling plan in schools, composting food waste, or other ways that we can save upon the resources that we're using. Water management is, for the long term, one of the biggest benefits we can see in sustainable design. And why that's important is because we use a lot of water on sites that is filtered that is not necessarily ever consumed. So we can better use our fresh water supply, and we can reduce the long-term cost of getting water into a building and water out of a building. And so we could use natural resources to get non-potable water into the building that collects rainwater and saves that rainwater for things that we don't consume. So why should we consider alternative energy sources and energy use mitigation? I think it's important just to make sure that we're seeing buildings long-term and the cost savings that we can get. There's some examples out there about how we can best use it. Although these aren't total solutions to energy savings, they are examples of small things we can do at buildings to help conserve costs. Things like solar panels or geothermal heat pump systems. Even green roofs can reduce heat consumption into a building that would reduce our costs in the future. Another part of the educational specification is the health and safety section of this report that helps us define how we can enhance the physical spaces to make sure that students are both healthier and safer in schools. By combining the two into the same discussion, we can see that there's an overall benefit to students in redesigned schools that take this into consideration. By avoiding future design that isolates students into spaces that might not have access to natural daylight, we can create brighter environments that end up being healthier for students and increase productivity. By thinking about the functions of our schools, we can encourage design that wants students to move around and staff to move around, that provides the access to indoor, outdoor very easily, and then to incorporate the art of the landscape and landscape architecture to the design of the building that encourages all these healthy things that students can benefit from a building. An example of this is biophilic design that certainly recognizes the inherent human need for nature to come together with humans. And if you do this through good sustainable design of bringing the outdoors indoor or providing that access right away to outdoor, we can create these environments that create dynamic natural lighting and even the natural ventilation necessary to get outdoor air in, and eventually gives the student that whole sensory experience that they can experience in a building that has a biophilic design. The idea of universal design is around accessibility, making sure that environments are designed to be usable by all people to the greatest extent possible. Some of these things that come into play are things of flexibility and simple and intuitive use. So when students see something or see pathways, it's easy for them. The size and the space are important because making sure that we cover the full spectrum of all students and staff that go through this building take into account those principles of universal design where the building is useful for all. Safety is obviously on the foremost thought of most people when we're talking about school design in the future. But there's all kinds of different aspects to safety when you're talking about the design of the building that come into play. Things like the landscaping on the outside, entry points of the building, and making sure we note limited access into and out of the building. Reinforcement of doors, double entries into schools, wider hallways that can contribute to better visibility for student monitors or teachers to look down a hallway, and also for the free flow of circulation so students aren't so crowded in hallways. But also the clear marking of classrooms or just good signage can allow for emergency responders to come in to better access space to assist in any type of emergency that could happen. When we talk about safety, we talk about active and passive security measures, but looking at active safety and security, you can see there's all kinds of great things that we can do in new design, which include cameras that are very active cameras for action and motion, that we have access by only cards, so if somebody loses their card, it could be canceled instead of losing a key, and all kinds of keys have to be remade. But also creating those clear separation of uses for roads and vehicles and pedestrians and bicycles on the site provide for a safer site for students to get and community members to get in and out of the building. Some examples that you can see in this picture of active safety and security is, for instance, of the red outline by the door. You can funnel visitors through a secure vestibule that directs them directly into administration. You can see by the railing and columns that prevent any sort of vehicle or any sort of motion through those. Large windows can add to good, not just natural daylighting, but can add for good sight lines for administrators to see what's coming from the outside in. And you can see there's a single point of entry here. That single point of entry helps maintain a controlled access into the building and allows for safer monitoring as people come in and out. Another aspect of the educational specification is how we develop site standards. This is a great example of how we optimize a site as a whole. This is a high school that was just built in Alabama, and you can see that there's a roadway around the building, and it's outlined in the floor plan in the bottom right corner. But what it does is it serves as an after-school testing track for their green technology racing team that uses nothing but sustainable energy to race cars. And so when school closes, they're able to use the track as a testing facility for their program. This is an example of how site standards have a relationship to the surrounding area. So the location of where the school is, the amenities next to it, play a big role in how we're going to look at some of the new construction we will complete in middle schools, but also some of the renovations that will be completed at the existing buildings. Things that we consider when talking about site standards are placemaking, things that involve the social aspect and how we use the site, access into it and what it links to, even the comfort of the site. Where on the site do we find that is areas of where people can escape to but still be safe? So how do we bring all these elements together and still provide the right environment for our schools? Certainly circulation plays a big role in how we develop sites. How and where people are going to enter and exit in the building and what time of day. There are peak times of entry and exit and use of the site during the day, but also we want to look at its future and how the demands of the site are going to change based on its surroundings. Not only does the site change and the demands on the site change during the day, but they change during the year and the seasons. So summer might look a lot different than winter when we have to clear snow, or even through the decades as there's development that occurs around our schools that dramatically change the environment around the school building. One of the final elements of the educational specification is how technology is going to play a role in how we design space in the future. Integration of technology is the key here. The equipment will change over time, but how we integrate technology into day-to-day learning will be more and more important. And so making sure we putting together the infrastructure along with the function of what technology and the role technology will play will be an important integration as we develop the educational specification. One of the key terms we use when we talk about technology is seamless integration. Seamless integration means that the technology is always going to be there. It's not isolated and in front of you, but it's part of what you do every day. Certainly as education returns to more hands-on and project and problem-based, we can see how we can use technology to encourage that type of environment that our students enjoy as they learn. So one of the last things we want to talk about is metaphors for space and resources. We don't necessarily in an educational specification talk about a classroom or a science lab. We more talk about the functions and how space is used. So we use a term called primordial metaphor that was developed by David Thornburg in 2007, but built upon after that, that really describes space in 5 different types: a campfire, a watering hole, a cave, life space, and then a mountaintop. The campfire is, as it sounds, a place where communication flows from one to many, where everyone can focus on the person that is talking. Watering hole used as an informal type of place for exchanging communication, places that you just naturally evolve to while you're in a building. There is still need in space to develop a cave type space that is a place of quiet reflection where students can escape, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a space, but it can be developed in furniture or how the room is arranged. The life space is a place where students can emerge into their learning, whether it be in a project-based environment, a career and technical environment, a science lab, but where you can start to create, and that creation brings meaning to what you're learning. Sharing our creation is an important part of learning. We call this the mountaintop. It is a place where to display, whether it's an art display or a gallery or a technology display, there's all kinds of different ways for students to share their experience of learning. To support those primordial metaphors, we also use metaphors for the learning resources that we use within the spaces that we have. The toolbox, it's where all the teaching resources is, and the toolbox can contain many things, whether it's a musical instrument or the tools that you need or the manipulatives you need to teach a lesson. We use the term Genius Bar because that term has become synonymous with the idea of a technology-rich space that allows support for the technology we use in education today. Water is a primary resource that's used in many spaces, even when we don't think they're used in spaces. And so we always consider where water should be and how we can use it more effectively in education. And certainly there's storage. We've come to the conclusion of doing this over many years that there's never going to be enough storage. But we need to make storage more appropriate for how education is going to be in the future. So the idea of how many locker rooms we use or the internal storage of manipulatives in classrooms and how we can better do that and best use space. So eventually during the educational specification, we're going to have to put all these together. This is an example of an experiential learning lab that brings together all these things. It is the life experiment lab, and you can see that. But it also, you can see the toolbox that is there for all the manipulatives, and certainly running water that's essential to how we do experiments, how we clean up, all those things. But this space also includes that campfire that allows for the presentation to be delivered from one person to many. Or you can see that there's a mountaintop in this that allows for the presentation or for how experiments can be shown to the whole group. The most practical piece to an educational specification is really defining the space types that you're going to have and how big those spaces are going to be. This allows a design professional to see how much square footage is going to be necessary to accommodate the program it is desired as described in the educational specification. So why does all this matter? Why not just design a building? Because we believe it's important that function should not follow form. Form should always follow function. And when all of these different things are being combined into what is a 21st century learning environment, you can see that there's a lot of pieces that have to be thought about before we can even start to design space. So where do we go from here? So we're excited to be meeting with community members that will be meeting over the next several months to help develop the educational specification. There are internal meetings that we have to have that concentrate on specialty areas that allow district experts to share with us current program models and then future desired programs. But also then to invite community members in to help build the vision for what space will look like in the future in the middle schools, because these buildings are for the community. We will be reviewing the educational specification together. There'll be final reviews and then be delivered to the Board of Education. At the end of the day, what is going to happen with an educational specification is it's going to be turned over then to a design professional who's going to take the vision, the mission statement, all the thoughts that go into sustainability, health and safety, technology, and then the practical space types and sizes, and all eventually be designed into both renovation spaces and to new construction.